Hey Nick, how are you?
I'm doing well, Andrew. How are you?
I'm well, man. You're looking very dark over there. You're looking, as I said before, a bit like the Godfather sitting in his dark cavern plotting how he's going to build his empire.
It's New York, man.
So how are you going to build your empire? And why don't we figure out what your empire is first? Tell us about your company. What does it do?
So the company is called Forkyoo, and basically, it we deliver chef-prepped meal kits to local customers from the most popular restaurants. So it's a bit like stacking Legos. It's kind of halfway in between getting takeout and having to prep something a la Blue Apron or plated. So it's kind of a middle ground between caviar, more so than seamless, and like a Blue Apron. But you're getting the quality and of the local the restaurants that you already know that you love. So you get to recreate that experience in the comfort of your own home.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I want to unpack there. One
Okay.
is one is your name,
hmm
right? You said your name and then you just sort of breezed straight through it as if it meant absolutely nothing. Give us one more time what the name of your company is.
It's Fork You, and it's probably it's like a quadruple entendre.
Okay, so give us
So
give us the spelling of this so people know that if they want to go check you out, figure out what you're up to, connect with you, talk to you, offer you lots of money, whatever they might want to do, where can they find you?
they can find us at forkyou.com, which is FORKYOO.com, and I'm Nick at ForkU. So if anybody wants to reach out directly to me, I'm certainly open to that. Um, so the name Fork You, it's I like to think of it as the elephant in the room. I wasn't born in New York, but I spent a great deal of my time here. My culinary chops are a result of being in New York, so it's almost it's when I say the elephant in the room, it's obviously it's when you hear it, it sounds like it sounds somewhat um, somewhat edgy, and I like to leave it that way. But I really like the product to speak for itself. And it originated with a punk song that I grew up listening to by this band Blitz. There was a song called "Fork You," so that's the in a nutshell. It's where it started. So, and
Okay.
it was just got stuck in my craw.
So you built an entire business around a song that you used to listen to as a kid.
You could put it that way, sure.
So I mean, I'm guessing it's targeted to appeal to certain types of people. Who do you see
Yeah,
as your Actually, why don't we back up again? Let's go back to the business model. Um, you sort of gave a lot of different business models as descriptors of what you do. So you said it's a bit like this, and it's a bit like that, and it's a bit like the other thing. For those people who aren't in the know or who haven't lived in New York and don't know some of these different brands, tell us simply what Forkyou does.
So basically, we recognize that there's this massive trend unfolding as new generations become purchasers, and one of those things is home cooking is again as it used to be, probably pre-industrial age and early industrial age, is becoming a big thing again. But the difference is that people are tremendously busy now, and in my estimation, a big part of that is the appification of life, if you will. So a lot of these things were intended to save people time, but people end up cramming more and more things into their free time, and they end up able to do less and less.
Mm-hmm.
So we recognize that there's this nexus um, between culinary appreciation. A lot of these chefs now are rock stars. You see them on these cooking shows, Chopped and so forth. And then you see people that really want to have a different level of intimacy with their food. People are in the know now. They're aware that there's um, impacts based on how they source their ingredients, their recipes, what they eat, what they put in their bodies. There's health implications. And so we saw that there was an opportunity between restaurants, this growing trend, and between restaurants and this growing trend. And we really feel like this business model it's a two-sided marketplace, kind of captures all of that and bundles it up nicely and with parsimony. So we essentially allow you to cook the dishes that you love in your favorite local restaurants at home with ultimate ease. I mean, that's the goal. We want to make it easy for the restaurateurs. We want them to be evangelists of Fork You, and we also want to in turn, make it so that our customers there's a really high touch customer satisfaction component here as well. So we want to make it so that that translates to them on that end of the market as well. So we're really just a vessel for that. We facilitate all of these things, and hopefully, the general population will see value in that. And of course, we're targeting millennials, probably the older two-thirds of millennials, dual income, urban dwellers, and we really want to be there for them when they want to cook something at home and they want something impressive and they don't want to run around and hunt these dishes down and hunt down these recipes and vet them and then prep everything. Because again, everything is professionally prepped by the kitchen. All the ingredients are coming from the restaurant kitchen that you know and you love. And as is the menu dish, the dish, it comes right off the menu. So we get a basic recipe for that. And as I said before, we aim to make it like stacking Legos with an active cooking time of 25 minutes or less.
Okay, so let me kind of simplify it a little bit, just for people. I mean, you gave us a lot there. You gave us your philosophy. You gave us the philosophy, the kind of why people are moving in that direction, what they're doing, and so on. But simply put, and just kind of boiling down what your business does, it gives people meal kits and the ingredients for those meal kits so that they can create their own delicious meals at home.
Right.
Are prepared by the better restaurants in their neighborhoods.
Correct.
So it's doing. So it's just summarizing what I see in that. So one, it's getting, if there's a particular dish they love at one of their local restaurants, the goal is to be able to recreate that dish at home for themselves, their friends, their families, to kind of wow the people that are important to them in their lives with the dishes which they all have grown accustomed to in the kind of better restaurants in their neighborhood. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's putting more money back into the local community. This isn't one of those things where, they're buying a meal kit from a company that's based in Texas and it's shipping from some distant land to arrive on their doorstep. This is giving money back to their local economy, giving money back to their local restaurants. It sounds a little bit. Well, I mean, it sounds amazing for the consumer. It sounds incredibly complex for you because you're having to go convince a whole range of restaurants in every single local area to play ball and to participate and to. I mean, it's great for them. They've got prep time that they're already paying people for prep time for getting all of these ingredients together. So it kind of makes sense. But how do you get them to kind of see the light and decide to take part?
That's a great question. And as you said, it becomes a new revenue source for these restaurants, which is huge because, a lot of times, these restaurants are constrained by their profit. They're low volume, excuse me, they're high volume, low margin businesses, traditionally restaurants.
They're capped by their terms,
Right.
by how many tables they can fill up at any one time.
That's absolutely correct.
And that's it. That's their cap.
Right, and that's why companies like Seamless and Try Caviar are able to thrive in today's market because with respect to the restaurant side of things. But the way that I convince them to do that is I remind them of these things, and because we're saving a tremendous amount of the labor costs versus say a Seamless or a Caviar where the dish comes from, it's fully prepped and then cooked, and then we're saving a lot of the labor costs in an ethical and legal way. Most importantly, both of those things are of equal importance. So in the average case, a lot of these restaurants, and we handpick them, so we try to identify them and get this out of the way early on. They're highly curated. Are actually going to have a bigger margin on a per dish basis by selling these meal kit versions of their menu items versus in-house. So there's a draw there. So a lot of times they're not even paying for the service. They're making more money. We're supplying the packaging. We're handling the logistics. All they really have to do is do what they're already doing. Prep these dishes out in quantity when they get the order and pack them up in the containers we give them. And then we handle the rest,
So from putting it in the container, so a restaurant has all of these containers because you placed an order or somebody's placed an order. Are they making a certain volume or are they making it by order?
They're making it by order, but as we scale, we're going to, and we get real data points back at scale. we're going to it'll enable us to batch it and become even more efficient on behalf of the restaurant. I mean, that's always the aim is to make it as easy as possible. Of course, there's going to be growing pains,
Yeah.
but make it as easy as possible, make it high touch, and have our business development associates in there working with them until they're entirely comfortable with the process, which is not really, it's not that complicated. It's scary at first, but it's a lot easier than even using Seamless. So.
So the restaurants end up with packs of cheese and dough and whatever else. Let's say that let's just use a pizza as an example. Their special sauce, their special kind of pepperonis, cheeses, mozzarellas, etc. They put those into the separate containers, and then that's it. They're your containers. You provide the containers. They then just put it on the counter and wait for your guys to come by, pick up that order, and then dispatch it to your guys. Run it to the order.
Correct.
The
That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do they make money? How do you make money?
Well, because we're reducing a lot of the labor costs and they're operating when they sell a meal kit versus the same item as a fully cooked dish in restaurant, there's a lot there's a lot of savings as far as cost goes for them. One, as I mentioned, is labor costs, but most of the
Sorry, let's pause there. Explain to me why there's a labor cost saving for making a meal kit for you versus making the same pizza, making and then cooking the pizza and delivering it to someone sitting 5 feet away in their restaurant.
Okay. Well, typically in a traditional kitchen, and it varies to some extent depending on the amount of the manpower in the kitchen, but typically, the cheapest pair of hands is doing the preparation. In the case of a pizzeria, there's one or two guys that are the pizza chefs, and so it wouldn't work quite so well for them, although they would still.
Give me a better example. What's the more usual example for your
So
sort
if you had a kitchen operating under the French Brigade system, where they had different positions, different stations, for instance,
right?
you would have the cheapest pair of hands in the kitchen doing the prep work, whether it's the dishwasher, the garde manger, or whomever. And typically, you're paying a prep cook in New York City $10 to $11 per hour. So our tests, when we ran these tests with the earliest test restaurants, we found that it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to completely prep and pack a single portion of a kit, ready for distribution.
So they can on average do 4 to 5 kits an hour.
Correct. And if they're and they may be able to do more. I mean, it depends on the prowess of their prep cook. And
So the
so
cost of the
you're
restaurant is the raw materials,
Mhm.
which they're buying in bulk anyway,
Right.
and a 20%, basically about 20% of a $10 an hour, $11 an hour resource. So in other words, $2.
Right. So yeah, it's up to 20%. It can be anywhere from 5 to on the high end 20%, but typically around 5 to 10% when you're operating with a brigade system. And this is versus labor costs of anywhere, and this is being generous, 33, depending again on if it's a brigade system, to 40 over
Sorry,
40%.
what I meant by 20% is if you're paying somebody $10 an hour
Yeah.
and they're doing five kits an hour, it's how much is each kit costing from a prep perspective? $2.
Right. So yeah, and you don't have, and then on top of that, you have to look at when you look at the savings side of it, is you don't have the more expensive, the higher paid staff in the kitchen even having to interact with that. It's not taking up counter space. There's no real overhead associated with these kits because it's all incidental. They're already running the restaurant. You're not going to have to, you're not impacting their table as we talked about before we touched on earlier. You're not impacting their real estate. In other words, a party for two is typically allotted an hour and a half in a restaurant,
Sure.
and in a full service restaurant. So in this instance, you can compare it to how many kits can you put out in that hour and a half at the cheapest pot with the cheapest pair of hands in the kitchen versus the fully cooked menu items.
Right.
So that's really the sale. I mean, it's almost a no brainer. At the end of the day, I mean, and this comes from my experience. I'm 36. I know I look it these days, especially all the work I'm putting in. This beard doesn't help. But I've been in this business since I was 14 in New York, and that's how we kind of started. I kind of started seeing that this was a possibility because it was something I was scratching my own itch at first. So this is something I started doing. But then when I dug deeper,
Explain that. Explain what you mean by that. Scratching your own itch. You were going out
well,
to restaurants saying, "I like your X dish. Can you provide me some of the stuff so I can do it for myself?"
even me
I
when
would
I
have thought,
worked in rest.
as a restaurant owner, I'd have told you to go to hell.
Well, right, especially back then. I mean, I think that the other another trend that's supporting this, the growth, the potential growth of Forkyoo is that a lot of there's so much competition in the restaurant space in these metropolitan areas that a lot of these um, chefs that don't change their menus seasonally, that aren't keeping up with these trends and aren't sourcing locally, are really kind of clinging to their recipes. And they're clinging to something isn't really is increasingly less tolerated by consumers as the population, new generations
So
become
sorry, just
spenders.
stopping you for a sec. Tell me about scratching your own itch. Why was this something that, and also, how did you even come up with this idea in the first place?
Okay. So I worked in restaurants as I mentioned for since I was 14. So when I oftentimes you work at night. I worked in great restaurants, top of the line French restaurants and so forth. And I was exposed daily to these awesome dishes. And I wanted to share them with my family, but because I worked at night, I didn't have the opportunity to. Plus, we were all busy, and shopping at supermarkets and trying to scrape together dishes that were on par with this, and finding the recipes that really took a tremendous amount of time, and there was no guarantee of how they would come out, or there was no safety there. It was all stepping off into the darkness. So I was working for a restaurant on Long Island called Kitchen a Bistro for Chef Eric Lamondo. Great, consistently rated number one in Zagat for Long Island, his restaurants. And I remember one day I was like, Eric, I'd love to buy your Berkshire pork porterhouse chops and pair it with whatever he was. Believe it was like a German potato salad or something that he was plating it with at the time, and get the recipe for it to make it at home. He's like, no problem. Gave me the chops, rattled off a kind of a quick version of the recipe, and gave me partially prepped food items. I took it home, I made it, and it was amazing. It was so easy. I felt really cool. My family loved it, and I said that's when it really started first hit me. And I said, "Wow, this is a potential. There's a potential business here." So I went back to Eric and I said, you can sell your. Why don't you sell this stuff out of the kitchen? Because I don't really have the time to orchestrate all of that. So that's when I really started thinking about it. And I continued to do this with Eric and other restaurants I worked at when I wanted to expose my family to these things that I was party to, but they weren't necessarily.
So,
So
so
that's really how it started.
so that's how you started. How do you take that time off of the shoulders of the restaurant owner or the chef? I mean, he said he was sort of his kind of resistance was, I don't have the time to do this, right?
Right. Like
So how do you make this not a time sink for these guys, even though they're working with you? What do they have? I'm just wondering how, if somebody's got resistance, how do you explain to them, this is going to be so low touch. This is just free money for you guys.
Right. Well, I think the overall aim, the higher level concept or aim for us with regard to the restaurants, is to make it as simple as possible to work within their pre-existing business model.
Hmm.
And the way that we do that is to really just tell it like it is. I mean, it sounds easy now, but there was a lot of experimenting to get to this point, even with the experience that I had. So, basically, you're already prepping these. If you can handle X amount, and we can, there's various mechanisms that we can put in place to make it so that we scale up for each individual restaurant as far as orders out every day and per week and so forth to get them comfortable, ramp them up, so to speak. You're really just prepping the food. You're doing this anyway, and that's it. You stop there, just dump them into these containers, and you get notified. We make it just as easy as possible, and we're continually getting pull requests from restaurants, and we try to implement them into our system as quickly as possible. Because again, our overarching goal with respect to the restaurants is to please them, to turn them into evangelists, and we're going to do that by making it as easy as possible and by delivering, going above and beyond what we promised them, when we first meet. So to me, it's like do you use Seamless? And plenty of restaurants do. I believe there's 30,000 restaurants using Grubhub Seamless. Um, and yeah, if they say yeah, or if they're familiar with it, you say, well, it's easier than that. Okay, so it's like if you can pack a to-go order, then you can certainly do this because it's more than half of the work taken away for you. And you're going to generate you're going to it's because we're highly curated, you're going to be shoulder to shoulder with other great restaurants, and eventually we see a network effect happening, and that's going to to touch on something that you said earlier, that's how that'll make it easier, kind of make our work a little bit easier going forward. Once we have these restaurants, we have these success stories, and we can point to the data and say, look, it's this simple.
So if I were a restaurant, I would be making sure that all of my customers were aware that they could now order their favorite dishes to prep at home. I mean, this would be something I would be putting on my menus, putting on my menus that people take away, so that they know they can also not only call up and have it delivered done, but they can also call up and get a meal kit. It just expands their brand. It expands their brand and expands their revenue.
That's absolutely correct, and I think that's our long-term vision. Is we really want to be we want to build brands. We want to be the economy of scale first and foremost for these small to mid-sized restaurants, but we also want to build their brand, eventually branching off into other products, marinades, sauces that are branded. Obviously minimal Forkyoo branding because it's not about us. Again, we're just facilitating all of this, but really just having say that French restaurant, like one of our partners, La Serene, like their brand. We can sell their sauce. Like we have a kit right now where it's a Parisian gnocchi with a Mornay sauce. So we can sell maybe a jar of their Mornay sauce. So people don't have to, learn how to cook these mother sauces. But if they want to, this is a great entry point.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, most people don't have the time to be professional chefs in addition to having a full-time job and in these urban areas.
So
So,
the funny thing is, if this becomes very popular, so for example, favorite restaurant A let's say for example, I live in Princeton, New Jersey.
right.
Some really great restaurants. Enoterra is a fabulous restaurant in the Princeton area. If people start getting the Enoterra meal kits, some phenomenal advantages to that we've already mentioned. But in addition, Enoterra is very farm to table, so people are not only getting good food that tastes good because it's the kit from that particular place. It's also healthy, well sourced, locally grown food. On top of that, if there becomes a kind of critical mass around consuming their products, they have the rationale to go to the local supermarkets, the small mom and pop supermarkets, and say, we've got a significant kind of customer base of people with our meal kits. We think it would be good for you guys to have those meal kits or some elements of them within your grocery store, right?
That's absolutely correct. There's a lot of possibilities, and you hit it on the head. I think that that's the next phase. Is we want to do all that we can for the restaurants because we realize that that is ultimately how we're going to please their customers and their potential customers. So that includes, like what you said, it includes potentially turning these restaurants, which are already, as you mentioned earlier, we're turning them kind of into these hyper-local fulfillment centers versus these regional ones that these more CPG-focused companies like Blue Apron are doing. But we can also then maybe negotiate on behalf of all of our restaurants in an area with their vendors, get lower prices in bulk for them, pass on, so it enables them to profit even more. The aim is to make it not a low margin, high volume business. We want to balance it out a little bit more and give them some more breathing room. So
I think
that,
the
that
reason why,
that's
I totally get that. As a restaurateur, I'd be sort of thinking about, okay, I'm not sure about some of the concepts in there about low margin, volume, etc., etc. But I certainly get the idea of leverage. So I've made a significant investment as a restaurateur in hardware, in real estate, in staff, and this is a way to leverage some of the least expensive elements of that, i.e., the preparation folks, to add 20% additional revenue to my business, 30%. It could mean that I recently went out and interviewed about 15 to 20 restaurateurs and talked to them about their businesses to try and get under the covers of what makes a restaurant successful. In the meantime, and this was about a year ago, some of those restaurants have ceased to exist.
right.
And I think because they are so much on the edge of new restaurants in particular are so much on the edge of every penny counts, that if they can leverage their investment, and it's often a considerable investment in hardware, in real estate, and so on, and just make that 20% extra, that could mean the difference between success or failure for these guys.
That's what we're betting on, and that's what we really want to. We really want to affect a change with regard to that, because you're absolutely right. There is a disproportion when you look at businesses in general, small to mid-sized businesses. There's a disproportionate fail rate for restaurants. It's not as high as some people have quoted in the past, but the first 3 years are definitely critical. And I always say everybody, all these restaurants are unbending spoons, and making sure that people don't accidentally break dishes or throw things away. Because that's the nature of the business. Every penny does count. That's absolutely correct. And my hope is that Forkyoo can really, especially with scale, really affect a major difference, positively impacting these restaurants, bring them closer to retail margins, which will give them more breathing room. It'll give them more flexibility. It'll give them more ability, a greater ability to focus on being innovative and keeping current. So as they don't have to kind of constantly worry about going out of business. It's a labor of love after all, like being a priest, being a restaurateur.
So a couple of quick things. A lot of the revenue from what I'm aware, a lot of the profit of restaurants come from actually the alcohol,
Right.
rather than just the kind of meal itself. If people are taking that meal and making it at home, is there a way that you can bring a bottle of wine, send a bottle of wine with the meal kit, or is that not? Are there laws against that? I'm wondering if the restaurant can actually, benefit from some of that alcohol transaction as well.
Actually, that's kind of the next phase. Once we prove this model on a smaller scale, we work out the kinks, and then we scale out. I think that's one of the main product lines that we want to focus on next. And there are significant legal barriers to being able to do that. But the good news is, with the growth of the alcohol delivery market verticals, if you will, we might be able to circumvent that in creative ways. And I think actually I have some ideas on how to do that. It's going to be cost. It's going to cost. But I think it'll be worth it, because you're absolutely right. They are offsetting a lot of their losses with alcohol. They're juggling their inventory in order to make it work, and they're working. They're focused on loss leaders and drawing people in, and then selling them desserts and what's called the upsell in the business. And these aren't disingenuous tactics. These are just things that they are forced to do in order to maintain a viable business that has some hope at seeing the light of day, for going forward. So I think that's what we want to focus on. We've talked about that internally. Is cracking that nut, is mirroring really their wine list, and then having that delivered alongside that. And I think I believe that there are ways to do that, and I'm committed to figuring them out. So if it's doable, I'll figure it out.
So now let's change pace a little bit. Obviously, you're crazy. Every
Of course.
entrepreneur is. How did you take me through the conversation you had with your first ever restaurant, apart from the guy that was a friend of yours who gave you those pork chops? The first ever restaurant that signed up to Forkyoo. How did you take me through the conversation? So you went up to their front door. It was off hours, and you sort of knocked and said, "Hey, I'm a crazy guy who's got this really random idea. Can I tell you about it?" Or what happened?
Right. So the first test restaurant, our very first restaurant that believed in us, that we approached, and we approached them cold. We had
I'm not
aggregated.
even interested in the one that believes in you. Tell me the one that didn't believe. Tell me the first one, the very, very first one.
That would be Oda House in the East Village on East 5th and B, a Georgian restaurant. I think they had been operating for maybe a full year, relatively successful. We already had feedback that people loved their food in the neighborhood. They were getting great press coverage. We saw that it was a kind of a very unique ethnic cuisine that was underrepresented. So Kristen and I, that's the co-founder and COO, we approached Maya Aquaviva, who's the chef and owner. And with it was very anxious, so I had to really use every trick in the book.
So Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, what? Just sort
It
of.
was we identified the right times to go in, so it's either just as they open to prep, which would be 10 or 11 in the morning, or between typically 2:30 and 4:30. So we went in, I believe, in the afternoon. We asked to speak with Maya. She was very gracious. She sat down. We told her, listen, this is what we're doing. We tried to appear as professional as possible. We tried to put forth that we really believed in this idea. I traded on my experience in the business. I gave her my background. I told her why I believed it would work. I also, told her, I said, look, there's going to be growing pains associated with it. We just want you there for us. We tried to mitigate risk as much as possible before we went in so we could say there is really no risk to you. We're not charging you a recurring monthly fee. We're not asking you to sign a contract right now. We just want to make sure this works and we want your feedback because we want to make it work for you. And so we'll implement your feedback on it, as far as redesigning technical aspects of the web app and so forth. And that appealed to her. And I remember her saying, I really appreciate that you came in here and you didn't ask for anything. So I think the takeaway from that is that, and what we did right was that we front loaded the value to them as much as possible. And we put ourselves last in the value chain. And I think that that's a lesson that really has to be learned early on if you want to avoid unnecessary frustration. Of course, you're going to have that. But she wasn't convinced right away. We talked to her for about probably a half an hour, 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. And this was before our pitch was refined, so to speak. So, fast forward to now, it's a lot easier for me to do this.
So
It's
is she a customer?
She is, yeah.
She did. So she didn't get the bouncer to throw you guys out then.
No, she didn't.
You didn't find yourself skipping along the sidewalk as some guy randomly threw you out the front door.
No, no, she hasn't. And I think that whole process was we had onboarded a bunch of these we looked at as test restaurants. Luckily, Maya's still with us. But we onboarded Flinders Lane. They stuck with us for a while. They were real sticklers. They saw the value in it, the way we presented. This was after Maya. They're an Australian restaurant. We started onboarding Eddie and the Wolf. We onboarded Bistro Shop, which was the guy who owned Bistro Truck. His restaurant unfortunately shut down, not because the building that it was in was condemned, so he went a different route. I don't think he's in restaurants anymore. But it was easier, knock on wood, than I thought it was going to be. It really did appeal to them, and that's when I first started kind of getting. It kind of imbued me with a sense of confidence, which just it helped because I'm already crazy, so that it synergized with my craziness nicely, and enabled me to go forward. But it was definitely really scary, and we did get rejections mostly early on and we still do. These people either aren't innovative enough, or they're scared, or they don't get the idea no matter how you explain it, or they have just so much on their plate that they can't even fathom taking on anything, no matter how easy it is. Or in a lot of cases, their kitchens are just tiny. Their space is so small because of the exorbitant rents in Manhattan and New York City that they see it as a threat to their already precarious, as we discussed earlier, business model, where they're unbending spoons and so forth and counting every penny. So, but we learn each time that we speak with somebody, and that's the important thing. We learn how to deal with those objections. In some restaurants, it may not be right so we have to face that reality too. But luckily, because it is highly curated, they're aware of this too, and we try to pick them very, very carefully and vet them carefully early on before we even set foot in the restaurant. So.
So I've got a great restaurant. I've got a strong group of consumers who are loving what I'm doing. It's innovative. It's fun. It's different, and I want to be part of Forkyoo, right? How do I go about doing that? What's the process? And am I going to have to spend 10 hours setting everything up and get 10 of my staff working on bits and pieces to kind of get ready for business with you guys, or is it a lot lower touch than that?
Well, what happens is if you're contacting us, you would go to get.forkyou.com and you would just fill out a quick form. Takes probably all of 30 seconds. Submit that. And then what would happen is our business development manager, Maddie Davidoff, would reach out to you. She'd shoot you an email back. She'd stop by the restaurant. And really, we found that because restaurateurs are so busy, it's such a chaotic business that we found the best approach is to really accommodate their schedule as much as possible. The onboarding, the whole process takes about, right now, it takes about a month, which is okay
Okay,
because,
that's start to finish in terms of you start the process, it's done a month later.
correct.
But how much time investment is required? I'm a crazy busy chef, restaurateur. I'm trying to run a business and make, deliver meals to everyone on a regular basis. How much of my physical time is going to be required to set this puppy up?
I would say less than 5 hours over the course of that month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it something I can delegate to people, or is it
Yes.
something I have to do all myself?
Most of that 5 hour, up to 5 hours, can be delegated to other people, meaning the prep cook and the front of the house staff, and really the training just amounts to quality control on our end. So Maddie would be in the restaurant holding your hand, actually doing a lot of the work while you watch early on in the process. This is post training, so the training is really just how do you receive the orders, how do you interpret them. It's pretty easy, but just to make sure that it goes off without a hitch, we have Maddie or our other business development people in the restaurant facilitating that, which is
When
why they're business development rather than just sales. It's
when
a
you say
big.
when you say how I receive the order, am I going to need some kind of expensive point of sale system? One more tablet that gets set up where I get special orders through, or is it simple? Is it simpler than that?
It's simpler than that. We use Trilio, so it's an SMS. Yeah, if you have a cell phone, smartphone, which the majority of people have, then you receive a SMS message with each order, an email as well, just for redundancy. And then you just you need a smartphone just to make sure that the order is picked up either by the delivery driver or by the click and collect by the customer themselves. So it's very
So order
simple.
via text message, order via email. How much lead time do I get between text message slash email and me needing to get that order done?
I believe right now we have a 2 hour buffer, but the restaurant in our system is included so that the restaurateurs can do no same day order and pickup. So it can have a 24 up to 24 hours. And they can also set limits on how many kits they sell per day of a dish, and how much they sell per week. So they can really manage their inventory without having to worry about kind of dropping the ball on it.
Okay. Sorry, I just realised my computer is disconnected, but don't worry, we'll keep talking. Okay. So when do I get paid?
We do every 2 weeks we cut a check to the restaurant because we recognize they are cash flow businesses. So we're not paying net 30 necessarily, but again, this is we can negotiate with the restaurants depending on their needs because every case is unique. But we find that every 14 days is a good amount of time to pay them in. So they'll
Okay,
get a
so
check.
so I do 100 meals in 14 days, and I'm on the hook for potentially paying for that raw materials and that prep time for that 14-day period. Within 14 days, I get paid.
Yes.
And if I find that the volume is increasing and I don't want to kind of keep that cost on my shoulders for the 14 days, I can discuss with you if the volume's big enough, 7 days or whatever it might be.
Absolutely, yeah. I found that a lot of purveyors that a lot of purveyors charge net 30. So if we're coming in under that, it's just going to add to their
Okay, so
total.
Seamless and all those guys paid net 30?
I believe Seamless pays net 30 as far as I know, yes.
Wow, okay, I didn't realize that.
But I would imagine that depending on the restaurant that's open for negotiation. But it does give Seamless a float from a corporate perspective as well, a 30-day float per restaurant.
Okay. I really appreciate the time you've spent taking us through your business model. I've been trying to take the questions from the position of the restaurateur
Right.
because these would be the kind of questions I'd be interested in understanding if I was deciding whether to do business with you. And I'm thinking, I'm hoping that some of the people listening to this are going to be potential customers. One quick question, who can sign up? Are you guys very geographic specific? In other words, you're only interested in restaurants today that are between Broadway and 7th Avenue in New York City, or can I apply to work with you if I'm based in San Mateo, California?
You can certainly reach out to us. That's going to determine, and we encourage that because that's going to determine the market that we open up next. But currently, we're focused in Lower Manhattan, and we're focused on a 2 to 3 mile radius of Soho around Soho. We're aiming for a hard launch around Valentine's Day, and that's going to be with a limited amount of restaurants. So we already have them in the pipeline. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to speak with a couple more of them. And
Where?
but beyond,
Where?
um, so
No, no, no,
what
not which specific restaurants, but you're saying you're going to have another launch. Is that another geography or?
every once we have the right data points, we're going to expand into probably the East Village, and then I think what we want to do is go to the Upper East Side, Upper West Side. So this is all within the span of the next 6 months. I'd like to start doing that. We've already elicited some interest. Actually, somebody reached out to us from DC. Um, it was a chef that worked for WD-50 and Elvez. He has his own spot. He wants to do business with us. So that may be the market we open up next, but we're open to anything. It really is going to be dictated by what the market demands. So I think don't be afraid to reach out if you're interested in being a part of it.
So, question for you: the reason why you're geographically constrained right now, I'm guessing, is because you're doing the delivery.
Right. Well, we recognize what our resources are, human resources and otherwise. So we want to deliver the best results, as I said earlier, to each individual restaurant. So if we have restaurants that are in wildly different areas as far as logistics are concerned, we're not going to be able to do that as effectively as if they're all kind of centrally located. Plus, we're working from a saturation standpoint. If we lock down all of the best restaurants in Soho and we satisfy Soho both restaurant wise and customer wise, then we know that we can move on to the next market. So, and we also don't have to waste any time traveling between two separate markets again, and at the expense of delivering on our promises to the restaurants and to the potential customers.
Right, but once you've got the platform working, once you've got the processes in place to make sure that restaurants have a really low touch, really easy setup, really easy way of doing business with you on an ongoing basis, payments processing, the whole thing. Once you've got that nailed, the only thing in my mind that stops you from taking this to Wyoming or anywhere really, even if it's just one or two key restaurants in each marketplace, is your current business model requiring you guys to pick up the product and deliver it into the hands of the end user. If the system does everything for the restaurant, so that all they're responsible for doing is preparing and packing the food, and then either paying for somebody to deliver it, which is covered by the cost one way or another anyway, I don't know that you are then geographically restricted, are you?
No, we're not actually. And to clarify, we are actually going to we decided that we're going to do the delivery in-house. So we're going to be hiring the initial delivery messengers, the food messengers, and we're going to be paying them out of that, at a market rate. And then so that way we aren't restricted like you're saying, because that would be, why do that, And I think that makes the most sense given the model. I think there's enough margin there for everybody to share and to get it done effectively. Because again, the aim is to make this a great, easy process for all stakeholders. So, yeah, I think that, once we do that, the sky's the limit. We rinse and repeat. We go to another market that has all of the signals, has similar signals to New York City. I don't think anything's going to beat New York City, but similar signals, maybe out west. And then just start, like you said, a handful of restaurants in each market to establish a presence, do the right thing by them, hire a regional, business development managers in those areas, and then train them, and then come back to New York and continue to build business here, and hopefully grow and satisfy everybody, and hopefully we'll always listen to our stakeholders.
So tell me where Forkyoo is going to be in 3 years' time if you have your nirvana and you achieve your vision. Is apart from a line of really cool clothing, because Forkyoo is just such a good name. What else are you going to be, or how big is your business going to be in 3 to 5 years' time from your perspective?
Well, luckily, I think we understand that, I think that our application of technology to this home cooking market is really what is our sets us apart from the other our co-innovators, if you will, like Blue Apron and Plated and HelloFresh and so forth. So really, I see us in every major metropolitan market in the U.S. in the next 3 years, and then from there, I think we'll be well received in European markets, in Western Europe, and in Scandinavia, Australia. I think there's a lot of room to grow. Actually, this model is not really the concept is an old way of thinking. It's an old restaurant model, in European model. And so we're kind of just we're taking tech and we're bringing it current and we're satisfying problems and with it using technology in today's kind of economic climate and so I see us in every major market in the United States. That's where I see, and then spreading into the bedroom communities from there.
Okay, I wonder if you'll still have your beard then, maybe.
It will either be crazier than it is now, or it'll be completely gone, and I'll look like a baby.
You look professional. Holy shit, that would be a terrible day. I'll know you've sold out then.
I'm
All right.
taking full advantage of the startup lifestyle.
So Nick, one more time, if somebody wants to, I don't know, offer you their hand in marriage, reach out to you about becoming a restaurant in your system, even if they're not, in a specific location in New York, because they could listen to this after, sometime afterwards. How do they reach out to you? How do they find you? How do they keep up with your journey?
Well, they can either go to get.forkyoo, Forkyoo.com, or they can email me directly, nick@forkyoo.com, and I will respond to anything that I get from anybody because I welcome feedback and I welcome partnerships. And it's never a question of if, it's a question of how and when. So that's how I like to
So
look
what
at it.
about those wonderful social places as well? Are you guys social, or are you too busy for social?
As far as social media,
Yeah.
we have a great Facebook page. We have Twitter presence. We have a Pinterest presence, Instagram presence. So yeah, we're there. I mean, we're pretty easy to.
It's all Fork you.
It's all fork you, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so if anyone has any questions, make sure they reach out to Nick. It's not a matter of whether he'll respond, it's a matter of when. I can't say that his response will always be, totally reverent and professional. You might get a funny response back from him because Nick is an interesting guy. Nick, I appreciate your time today. Thank
Oh,
you.
I thank you for your time, Andrew. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for taking us through Forkyoo. Thank you for joining the third cohort of FoodX. It was a pleasure judging you as part of that judging process, and it's really great watching you guys grow and be successful. I'm really proud of what you guys are achieving.
Well, you're always gracious, and I'm sure we'll see each other again. And I'll be willing to. I'm more than happy to help out with the upcoming cohort. So
Cool, man. Well, good luck to you. I'm gonna press pause and then we'll just say goodbye to each other. Is that all right?
sounds good.
All right.